Thank you, IT. So it is 5:30 and good evening and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting today, the 19th of August. My name is Councillor Catherine Lawrence and I am the committee chairman. This meeting is being streamed to the public and is being attended by members of the committee through Microsoft Teams. With me, I have the support of the following officers: Richard Holt, Head of Planning and Enforcement; Sarah Chapman, our legal advisor; Claire Wallachek from Democratic Services; and our planning officers Nathan Loud, Chris Kingham, Chris Davis, Karen McCulloch, Paul Varnish and Nigel Reeves. Before we begin working through the agenda, I will go through some rules on procedure. As set out in the introduction, this meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being monitored by IT services. If at any point there are any streaming issues, then I will be informed and the meeting will be adjourned until such time that the technological issues can be resolved. If during the course of the meeting any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, it will continue. It will be deemed that the member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. If it is my connection that goes down, then the Vice Chairman will take control of the meeting. For officers and speakers, please switch off your microphones and cameras, and I will call you to speak at the appropriate times. For committee members, your microphones and cameras should be switched off unless you are speaking. If you wish to ask a question on the officer's report or during debate, please use the raise hand function and wait for me to ask you to speak. The vote during virtual meetings will be the raise hand function. Are there any questions before we move to the formal agenda? I will now ask our Democratic Services Officer to confirm the attendees at the meeting. Your name will be called out. Can you please confirm your attendance? Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So moving through the names alphabetically, Councillor Mrs Brown.
Yes, present.
Councillor Kieran Brown.
Present.
Councillor Butlin.
Here.
Councillor Cranham.
Present.
Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, here.
Councillor Mrs Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Gillias.
Present.
Councillor Miss Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor Picker.
Present.
Councillor Roodhouse.
Present.
Councillor Sanderson.
Present.
And Councillor Srivastava.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we will now move on to the formal agenda. Agenda item number 1 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July 2020. Is it your wish that I sign these as a true record? Can you please raise your hand? Has everybody voted?
Chair, we've got 11. Oh, sorry, no, that's it now. We've got 12 that have voted.
Thank you. Okay, you can lower your hands, everybody. Agenda item 2 are apologies. Do we have any apologies for the meeting?
No, Chair, everyone is present.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 are declarations of interest. So to receive declarations of A, non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors, and I'll declare an interest in agenda item R19/1391 at the Rugby radio station as a ward councillor. Councillor Sanderson, your hand is up.
1 Colditz Cart Street, by virtue of being in my ward.
Thank you. Councillor Picker.
R19/1391 ward councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Garcia.
R190283 as ward councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Gillias.
Yes, ditto as Councillor Garcia.
And Councillor Brown.
R19 1496 Ward Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, you can take your hands down if I've recorded all of those. Declarations of B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Okay, I take it then there are none. And C, notice under section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of council tax. Thank you. Right, agenda item 4 are applications for consideration. And the first application that we have is R19 0972 1 Caldicott Street, Rugby, and the officer to present this is Nathan Loud. Nathan, over to you. Nathan, we can't hear you. Okay. Nathan, we don't seem to have any sound from you. Nathan, I can't hear you.
Chair, shall we request a short adjournment whilst we just sort out the technical issue?
Thank you, that would be lovely.
Michael, would you be able to pause the stream for us temporarily?
Thank you for that. Just to explain, we had a few technical issues there, but we should be good to go. So I'm now going to hand over to Nathan Loud, the officer who's going to take us through number 1 Caldicott Street. Nathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to 1 Caldicott Street and seeks full planning permission for erection of a single dwelling house and forms a resubmission of a previously refused scheme. Members may be aware that this application was brought to committee early this year when it was considered by members that the application should be deferred to allow further discussions with the applicant about the distance to the southern boundary. Members may recall, who were present at the meeting back then, the applicant disputed the distance of 2.7 metres from the boundary, contrary to what was annotated on the plan submitted. Over a period of 3 months, the applicant has failed to engage positively with the local planning authority, and as such the application has been brought back to members to consider the scheme. Part of the site is located within the Hillmorton Road conservation area, and the access road which links Caldicott Street to Temple Street is within the conservation area. This is a scheme that was previously refused. It comprised of a 3-storey dwelling house with a 3-storey basement area and a 3-storey addition, which connected the main dwelling house to proposed outbuilding to the rear. This was refused for reasons relating to impact upon visual and residential amenities. This is the proposed scheme, which is before you now, which you're asked to consider. It still includes a 3-storey basement area. The first 2 lower levels will be used for services, i.e. the provision of anaerobic digester for domestic purposes and a ground source heat pump. Above ground, it will comprise of a 2-storey dwelling house with hips roofs and a single-storey rear flat roof projection. You will then have an enclosed 10-metre garden, and then at the rear is proposed an outbuilding which will have parking accommodation at ground floor and a bedroom and bathroom above. This is just the layout of the proposal. The proposal will also include a bollard along the Caldicott Street entrance to prevent vehicle access. That will be located in this position here where my cursor is. The main dwelling house, as stipulated on the plans, will be 2.7 metres from the southern boundary, and the outbuilding, which will be in this area here, is set back further at distance of 3.6 metres to the southern boundary. These are photos taken from site. The application is retrospective, with the basement being excavated and reinforced to the full extent of what's being proposed. Other retrospective works include the curbing of the side access and the installation of the drainage along the access, as you can see from the photos. This is a current street view of the site. The application site is here. This is the new development on the former Tebbs Nursery site. This pair of semis here is number 1 and 2 Rose Lane, and this is number 3 Caldicott Street. This is a historical street scene of circa 2009, when the previous building on the site was present. Obviously, this has now been demolished. Turning to the key issues, the first one being design and visual impact. When viewed from the street scene, it's considered that the proposal won't be able to scale to neighbouring properties. The design is more akin to properties within the street scene. The ground floor frontage is more reflective of the original building. You can see a photo here of how it looked previously. The side elevation is more traditional of an end of terrace property. It incorporates a private amenity area which is 10 metres in length, and the proposed outbuilding would not be out of character with the surrounding area, and the 3-storey basement would not be visible above ground level, and overall it wouldn't have an adverse visual impact. The other key consideration is residential amenity, and the reason why the recommendation is for refusal. The proposed dwelling would be positioned 2.7 metres from the boundary to the neighbouring properties number 1 and 2 Rose Lane. Given the proximity of the proposed dwelling to the boundary, it's considered that it would have an overbearing impact upon the amenities of these neighbouring properties. Other issues which have been considered and deemed to be acceptable is the principle of development, sustainable buildings and air quality, access, parking provisions and highway safety. The installation of the anaerobic digestion, subject to details relating to full noise specification, mitigation and odour control, and details of how the product will be used as specified for, would in principle be acceptable. However, the overall recommendation is for refusal on reasons relating to the impact it would have upon the residential amenities, which would conflict with local plan policy, CDS1 and guidance contained within the NPPF. The recommendation is therefore for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And that was a very clear and very comprehensive report on the situation. And I appreciate the update at the beginning for councillors' benefit. Could you just clarify for us, please, the extent of the work that was actually carried out without any planning permission?
Okay, yeah, so in terms of the work which has been carried out without planning permission, so the basement which he is proposing has been excavated to the full depth and length to which is being proposed. They've also the applicant has also installed the drainage along the access road as well. So that's the full extent of works to date.
Thank you very much. Committee, do you have any questions on the officer's report, please? Councillor Mrs. Brown? You will need to unmute.
Thank you, sorry. Can you confirm, please, Nathan, that the applicant's been given every opportunity to provide the additional evidence that we spoke about in March? And that the second part of the question is, if planning permission is refused for this, will the applicant be expected to rectify what's already happened there?
Okay, Nathan.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to come back on that point. Yes, following the committee meeting earlier this year, we've made repeated attempts to try to get in touch with the applicant through phone calls, emails. We even went on site, but the applicant has failed to respond to any requests to put amended plans in or to address the issues which were raised at the previous committee. Should the application be refused, there is the opportunity for him to appeal to the planning inspectorate, as with any refusal of planning permission.
Thank you. All right, does that answer your question, Councillor Mrs. Brown?
Yes, thank you, that's very helpful.
Okay, you can take your hand down then. Are there any other questions of clarification? No. In that case, we will move into debate. Gosh, lots of hands going up. Councillor Picker, I think your hand was first up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I seconded deferral at the previous time that this application came before us, because based on what the applicant was saying and the responses of officers, it sounded like the conflict with SDC1 could be overcome. So I do regret that we haven't managed to do that, and the applicant hasn't managed to achieve what he reassured the committee he could do. So I think based on that, we have no option but to refuse this application. So I will propose refusal for the basis set out by the officers.
Thank you very much. Next in line, Councillor Sanderson. You need to unmute.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I second that move for refusal? This has been an ongoing saga over a number of years, with no real progress from the applicant on the matters that have been raised with him. I certainly agree with the recommendation that this is an overbearing development in terms of Rose Lane, and I consider the provision of a bollard in the centre of the access lane to be completely unneighbourly and a loss of amenity for the neighbouring properties. For those reasons, I'm happy to second the call for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Garcia?
Well, I was just going to second the proposal because I also feel that it's been going on for way too long. I feel so sorry for the people that are having to live next door to this property, and I think that the applicant has been given more than enough time to rectify things. So as far as I'm concerned, the sooner it's refused, the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gillius?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, it was at the last meeting that I actually proposed that we did defer this to get more information, and of course we've given him the opportunity and the benefit of the doubt, and I've got to support everybody else's comments, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Mrs Brown? Your hand is raised. You need to unmute.
I'm so sorry, that was a mistake.
All right, thank you. Right, Councillor Gillius, your hand is still raised. No, Councillor Sanderson, your hand is still raised. Thank you very much. In that case, it has been proposed by Councillor Picker, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to say something else?
No, just trying to get the thing to work.
All right. In that case, we will move to the vote. All those in favour of refusal, please show.
Only 10.
Okay. Claire, how many do you make that, please?
So that's 11 for refusal, Chair.
Okay, hands down then, please. All those against? Neil, you right. Neil, your hand is up for you're still up. Right, okay. So those against? Anybody against? Anybody abstain? Oh, right. Anybody abstaining? Are we one vote adrift then, Claire?
Yes, Chair, it looks like one member hasn't voted. I mean, under the Constitution, there isn't an absolute requirement for a member to vote, but we would expect each member to vote either for, against or abstain.
Right.
If there is any member that's had an issue with raising their hand, perhaps if they want to say so.
Okay. In that case, I'll do the vote again then. All those who are voting for refusal, please raise your hands now.
Through you, Chair, we're just missing Councillor Sanderson. I think is having a few issues with the voting. Oh, there we go.
There it is.
I think his raised hand function isn't working very well tonight. Right. I'm assuming, Councillor Sanderson, your hand isn't raised, but is meant to be. Right, gotcha.
Yeah,
Chair, that's unanimous now.
It's unanimous now. Thank you very much. Okay, so all the hands can go down. And we will move on to our second application tonight, which is R19/0283. And this is Broomfield Farm, Colehurst Lane, Coombe Fields. And Chris Davis is the officer to present. So I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that members can see my presentation?
Yes, that's fine, Chris.
Yes, I can see.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This application relates to Broomfield Farm, Colehurst Lane in Coombe Fields. It's a certificate of lawful existing use or development application. In this case, it relates to the parking of lorries, vans and plant machinery and the storage of building materials. Just briefly to go over the scope for consideration on this one, unlike planning applications, certificate of lawful development applications focus solely on whether, on the balance of probability, there is sufficient evidence to support the applicant's case. An application for a certificate of existing lawful use or development could therefore only be refused if A, the applicant failed to provide sufficient evidence to support their case, and or B, the LPA had sufficient evidence to disprove or significantly bring into the question the validity or accuracy of the evidence provided by the applicant. There are therefore matters which cannot be considered for a certificate of lawful development application. Matters such as the suitability of the operations for the location, greenbelt considerations, aesthetics and residential amenity are not material planning considerations in a certificate of lawful development case, and therefore cannot be used as either A, the grounds on which an application is assessed, or B, the basis of a reason for refusal. Moving on to some photos of the site. The site is comparatively large, so I've taken a series of photos for you, and I'll try and describe the context as best as I can. This photo is taken from close to the entrance to the site, looking down towards the end of the piece of land that is covered by this application, and which terminates roughly adjacent to where these trees are here. The building that you see on the right-hand side here is the stable building that I'll give you more photos on shortly. As we move through the site, this is a photo taken from the point at which the access drive shown in the previous photo veers off towards the residential property on the left-hand side. The fencing here is around a menage that does not form part of the application site. And again, taking a view slightly further down, again, this land that's enclosed here is not part of the application site, but this gives you an example of the types of vehicles and items that are stored in the open area in this site, including a shipping container towards the end there. Again, here's an example of two of the vehicles that were stored on site, a lorry and a small excavator. And two photos here showing an example of the kind of items that are stored. Here we have, for example, some security fencing, some domestic wheelie bins, some bags of sand, and some various items connected with construction, including here a large pile of paviour blocks. Moving on to the stables here, we have full photos of you going around the exterior. Firstly, this is the land to the side and rear of the stables, and where you see the vehicle here, that car is actually parked on Colehurst Lane beyond the extent of the site. We've then got a photo of the land between the stable and the front of the site here. Again, that's that same silver car on Colehurst Lane, and this shows it in relation to the access. We then have the photo here that is showing the courtyard effect that would be in front of the stables. This would have been the stable yard originally, and some very limited outside storage that we've got here. And finally, this is the land to the side of it. Basically, this is an area that seems to be kept clear most of the time, presumably for the turning of vehicles, but you can see there's a little bit of storage here along the edge. Moving to the interior of the stables, these three are just some typical examples of the kind of storage that was in the stables on the day of the planning site visit. We've got here some large plastic crates of the kind used to mix materials in. And we've also got some tools and some ladders. Again, we've got ladders here, and in this stable, we had some more general storage. So there were things like cupboards, they had some tools, and we had a few bits of cable. To clarify the extent of the site, here we've got the site area for you. So to indicate as we go through, this is Broomfield Farm, house and domestic buildings belonging to the applicant. Colehurst Cottage does not belong to the applicant, it's a neighbouring dwelling. We've then got a disused arm of the Brinklow arm of the Oxford Canal. Colehurst Lane itself. The stable building referred to in the planning application, which is L-shaped building here. And this remaining area that's hatched is the extent of the outside storage area. And this area here is that open turning area I showed you in the photos. In terms of the evidence submitted to support the applicant's case, The applicant's case is that the land and stable building have been used continuously for a period in excess of 10 years for the purposes of parking lorries, vans and plant machinery and storage of building materials. In support of their case, and in addition to the information given on the application form, the applicant has submitted emails from himself, a neighbouring landowner and a former Warwickshire County Council officer. The application also includes plans to show the extent of the site affected by the application, an example of which you've just been shown. The submitted documents, whilst indicating events occurring within the qualifying timescale period, do not support the continuous use of the site for all of the purposes stated on the application form. Skip hire and storage appears to have formed a material part of the operations during the qualifying period, including direct references to skips within the supporting evidence emails. Skip operations are not referred to in the development description on the application form, as the applicant has previously been advised by the LPA that skip activities will not be tolerated on this site. As with any lawful development application, we have sought guidance from the Council's Legal Services team. After considering the evidence submitted, the Council's Legal Services Department have advised that there is insufficient evidential evidence to support a continuous operational use for the period declared on the application form, 10 years. Without sufficient factual evidence, on the balance of probability, the application is likely to be refused. To summarise the case for you, there is some evidence of occurrences of the declared activities, but not enough evidence to support a continuous use. The evidence submitted is very limited and puts emphasis on matters not relevant to the development declared on the application form. The recommendation is therefore for refusal due to the lack of sufficient evidence to support an argument that, on the balance of probabilities, the activities as set out on the application form have occurred continuously for a period of 10 years or more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, much appreciated, and particularly the photographs so that we could see what was happening on the site. Could you just clarify for me, in the application that was submitted, were there any dated photographs from the previous 10 years to show the continuous occupation of the site?
Yes, Chair, I can confirm there were no photos submitted at all within the supporting documents for this application.
Thank you. Committee, do you have any questions of clarification for the officer on their report? Councillor Eccleston, your hand's first up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just for clarification again, is the officer suggesting that the site has been or is being used for a commercial business, i.e. skip hire? Is that the intimation?
Through you, Chair. The applicant has operated a skip hire. On the day of the site visit, no skips were observed apart from one on the back of a lorry. But as you saw in the photos, a vehicle with the insignia for Brinklow Skip Hire was located there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions of clarification? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Chair. Should we follow the officer's recommendation? There's nothing to stop the applicant from making a new application for retrospective permission for different uses or the uses that they're currently using it for.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. I don't know whether the officer or whether legal need to reply to that one.
Through you, Chair, happy to respond. Yes, there's nothing to stop the applicant putting in future applications in respect of either retrospective planning permission or planning permission going forwards, and obviously they will be determined in the normal way, taking into account all appropriate factors. So there's no guarantee that would be granted, but he does have that route available to him, along with the ability to appeal any decision about a certificate of lawfulness if he so chose.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Garcia.
On the day that the site visit took place, was the applicant warned there was going to be a site visit?
Through you, Chair, as it occurred during the national lockdown, The requirements for site visits at the time required that I let him know I was occurring to tell him to stay inside while I was conducting the site visit. So he was aware, yes, that I was going to be going.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Srivastava, your hand is up.
Thank you very much. What I wanted to ask you, the land is not being used continuously, but officers said this has been used for some time. What is this? What is this sometime? How many? What is the evidence? How many times? What is the period?
Through you, Chair, the evidence submitted, apart from one occurrence, which was the email from the former Warwickshire County Council officer, gave no specific dates or times, but from previous site visits and involvement prior to the application being submitted, I am aware on some occasions that some of the activities declared have been being carried out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Can you take your hands down if you have asked your question and you don't have another question to ask? Councillor Eccleston, have you got a supplementary question? Councillor Sanderson, have you got a supplementary? You're muted, Councillor Sanderson.
No, Chair.
Okay.
Just a little technical problem.
Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So as we move into debate committee, this is a certificate of, I can't even say it now, and we have to be convinced that for a certificate of lawful existing use of development, that there has to have been evidence of continuous use rather than intermittent use. Can I have that clarified, please? Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Just to recap, for certificates of lawfulness, got a few notes just to refresh your memories because they don't come up very often. And Chris helpfully provided a little rundown at the start of her presentation, which was very clear. But essentially, there are two types of certificate of lawfulness, and the one we're considering is for existing use. When you're looking at an existing use, you need to be able to establish that the development is lawful because no enforcement action can be taken. No enforcement action is currently in force, or planning permission is not required. So the time period that Chris was referring to, about 10 years, is if there's been 10 years continuous use, it means that they are immune from enforcement actions. That's why it's important that it's a 10-year period and it's a continuous use. The local planning authority's decision maker, so that's the planning committee this evening, needs to consider whether on the facts that they've got in front of them, it's lawful. So there's no planning merits, as Chris highlighted, to be taken into consideration. It's just, is it lawful or is it not lawful? So what we're looking for, again, is 10 years of continuous use, because that means we can't take enforcement action any longer. It's important to note that the onus is on the applicant to provide sufficient information to support their application. We are allowed to then look into if we have any evidence that contradicts the application or makes their evidence any less probable, but the onus is very much on the applicant to provide the information. And as Chris has rightly noted, if there is insufficient evidence to support what they are stating has been 10 years of continuous use, then you are within your rights to refuse the application based on that lack of evidence. Otherwise, the test involved in granting lawful development certificates, as Chris again has highlighted, is on the balance of probabilities. Are you, as planning committee members, satisfied that the applicant has evidenced 10 years of continuous use? If you are, you can grant the certificate. If you're not, you can refuse the certificate.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was very clear. Right, we'll move into debate. Councillor Butlin, your hand is raised. We can't hear you.
It's just another question, really, kind of because supplemented to what has just been said. Sarah's just pointed out. Was the research an aerial photograph search? Because I kind of do a lot of aerial photo searches, kind of clarify someone's existence. Have we done an aerial photo search? Obviously, the applicant hasn't provided any aerial photo evidence. So, have we got any evidence by doing those searches to kind of disprove the applicant's case?
Through you, Chair. No, we haven't done that, but there have been some on historical investigations, but not in relation to this application.
Thank you. And I think Sarah has just reiterated that the onus is on the applicant to provide that kind of information to show continuous use. Am I correct? Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Right, and thank you. Right, Councillor Cranham, you're next.
Are we into the debate?
We're into the debate, Councillor Cranham, yes.
Well, the onus is on the applicant to prove continuous use, and he clearly hasn't done it. So I'm quite happy to recommend the acceptance of the officer's report.
Thank you, Councillor Cranham. Councillor Garcia, you're next. Need to unmute.
Sorry, I would like to agree with Councillor Cranham, actually. I think that the applicant's been given plenty of time to dispute this, and so I'd like to second refusal.
Thank you very much. Have we got any other hands up? Councillor Gillius, I can see your hand is in the air.
Yes, Chair, I'm extremely familiar with that neck of the woods. I've been done numerous jobs at the two farms at the end of Colehurst Lane and at the neighbouring property of Colehurst Cottage, and I'm inclined to agree entirely with the observations and recommendations by the officer.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Butlin, your hand is in the air again, or have you just forgotten to take it down? Right, have we got any other hands in the air? Councillor Gillius, your hand is still in the air. Councillor Srivastava, your hand is in the air.
Obviously, they are not using continuously. They are using sometime intermittently, sometime. Is it possible for to have a consider the application and refer it again? So I say we can ask for more evidence.
I think that we are, as Sarah has said, we are asked to judge on the basis of the report and the evidence that's been submitted to us tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions, any more points on debate? In that case, refusal has been proposed by Councillor Cranham and has been seconded by Councillor Garcia. All those who are voting for refusal, would you please raise your hand now?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. Hands may go down, so that application is refused. Thank you very much. We now move on to the third application, which is R19/0976.
Close to the woodland, looking up towards the houses on R2 and R1. And then this is from the same point looking south towards the development in R2. As you can see from these cross sections, the site is very sloping. This is sloping down from east to west, but these other sections also show how the levels change when you go across the site from the north to the south. So it is sloping in two directions, like a lot of the land on the Gateway site. The key issues to assess as the principle of development has been established are therefore the design and layout, including the impact on amenity, housing mix, affordable housing, landscaping, biodiversity, transport, highways and car parking. In terms of design, the proposals are for a mix of 2, 2.5 and 3-storey properties. These are generally traditional designs with contemporary properties in key locations, and dual aspect properties, changes in materials such as render and cladding are used to add interest to the street scenes, and this reflects the approach taken on other phases of the Gateway development. This design is considered acceptable and suitable separation is provided from the neighbouring developments and also within the proposed development itself. In terms of housing mix, policy H1 sets out the target mix, although it does allow for alternative mixes to be considered. The proposals are within 1% of the recommended mix from the strategic housing market assessment, and this is considered acceptable. In terms of affordable housing, the current policy requirement would be for 30%, with a 10-year split of 84% rent and 16% intermediate. However, the outline section 106 requires the target provision of 40% affordable. However, that is a target, and the MPPF, the local plan and the section 106 agreement allow reduced provision subject to a viability assessment. As I mentioned, the proposal is for 8 affordable units, which is around 5.48%, which will be a mix of affordable rent and shared ownership. The applicant submitted viability information to demonstrate that the provision of additional affordable housing would render the development unviable. This was independently assessed on behalf of the council, and the information included an assessment of the build and sales costs. The development includes abnormal site costs due to the steeply sloping nature of the site and the foundation and retaining structure requirements linked to this. And when the assessment was submitted, the assessor sought additional information from the applicants to clarify the information they provided. The assessor considered the information was acceptable, and the conclusion was that the proposed provision was on the limits of viability. It is therefore demonstrated that to increase the level of affordable housing would not be viable, and the level of provision is therefore in accordance with the policy and the MPPF and the outline section 106. In terms of highways, amended plans and information were provided following initial comments from the Highway Authority, and they raised no objection on highway safety grounds. Car and cycle parking is proposed in accordance with the council standards, and there is in fact an over provision of car parking. The proposals provide pedestrian links to the overall site and wider area, and access to cycle links and public transport. The county are proposing to provide a cycle link which goes along Brownsover Lane and connects to Boughton Road close to the Leicester Road roundabout. Objections from residents have raised numerous objections to issues related to construction traffic using the Spine Road through the existing residential areas. A temporary construction access has now been approved from Leicester Road, and it's proposed to use this to access the proposed development. In terms of open space and landscaping, the proposals include the amenity areas adjacent to the development, planting to the development plots, and the management of woodland areas to the north and west, which will include the provision of a play area within the woodland. There will also be woodland management carried out, including the replacement of non-native or poor condition trees and the removal and replacement of ash trees on the eastern boundary, with native species proposed as the landscaping. So the photos here, that's showing the woodland to the north of the site, and then that's a shot within the woodland. The woodland management plan and the landscaping proposals and tree reports were amended during the course of the application to address comments made by the county ecologist and the tree officer. The proposals involve the replacement of these ash trees, which would be fronting the Spine Road, and their replacement with 5 oak trees and other areas of landscaping. There's no objection from either the ecologist or the tree officer to this work or to the works within the woodland, and these are some of the poor quality non-native trees within the woodland which are going to be replaced at the request of the tree officer. Bird boxes, log piles and unmown areas are going to be provided within the woodland to create habitat, and hedgehog holes will be provided to boundary fences to allow connectivity. The landscape and biodiversity impact is therefore considered acceptable. The proposals also include a play area within the woodland to the north, and the principle of having a play area in this location is considered acceptable by the ecologist, tree officer and the council's parks department. The original plans were amended to address comments made by parks, but to date I have not received up-to-date comments from parks as to whether those are acceptable. However, the 106 allows those to be agreed prior to the commencement of development, so that can be addressed at a later date to ensure the scheme is acceptable. The site is within the air quality management area, and if this was a new standalone application, we would be looking for mitigation for air quality impacts under policy HS5. However, national guidance is clear that additional conditions cannot be applied at the reserve matter stage to reflect changes in local policy. However, the applicants are proposing passive electric vehicle charging points to 25% of the properties, and proposals to create pedestrian cycle links and public transport will also mitigate some of the impacts on air quality. An informative is suggested to bring this policy to the applicant's attention and ask them if they can consider other measures. The development is considered acceptable in relation to drainage, water usage, archaeology and broadband provision. In terms of the planning balance, the proposals provide a suitable design and layout with a mix of housing. The level of affordable housing is supported by the viability assessment and is therefore deemed acceptable. There will be suitable landscaping using native species, and the development will secure the management of the existing woodland. There will not be an adverse impact on highway safety, and it will allow access to sustainable transport throughout the site and the wider area. It will also allow the provision of housing in accordance with the outline permission. These factors carry weight in favour of the proposals, and approval is therefore recommended, subject to one change to the plan schedule to make reference to an updated street lighting plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Very comprehensive report, and in particular, you addressed the affordable housing level, the viability there, also looking at the landscaping and the car parking, all of which are issues that we frequently discuss at Planning Committee. So, does any committee member have a question of clarification? Remember that this is a reserved matters application. Councillor Sanderson.
Oh.
I can't hear you, Councillor Sanderson.
Could the officer confirm how long this permission is for? Are we talking 3 years, 5 years, or forever?
Sorry, the reserved matters submission.
Yes.
Right, hold on a second. I'll get the condition from the previous outline to check the dates for you. So the outline permission was granted, sorry, there's a lot of conditions on it. The outline permission was granted in 2013. That gave 12 years for approval of reserved matters application to be submitted. So that will be until 2025. Then the development must not be begun any later than 2 years from the final approval of reserved matters.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Councillor Gillius, you're next.
Yeah, just one question, Chair, and that is issues surrounding car parking. I know that's always comes every time, and of course 53 of the parking spaces are set out as including the garage space. And my question is are those garages suitable to put a car in? Because in previous applications that come before us, you can't get your car in the garage. Well, if you get it in, you can't open the doors. So is that something that's been looked into? And have we got a condition? I've had a look through the condition, but I can't see it. Have we got a condition relating to the non-conversion of those garages, so they can't be converted to a residential space other than being used as a garage?
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Karen.
Through you, Chair. In paragraph 8.12, it details that the Highway Authority commented, although the garages were of the required size, they were concerned that people may choose not to use them. So they are the correct size. And in relation to the condition point, condition 6 is proposed to prevent the conversion of garages without consent.
Okay, so we've got that covered. Thank you. Are you okay with that, Councillor Gillius?
Fantastic, thank you.
Right, Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back on policy H2 and affordable housing, because I must be blunt, I'm not happy with this at all. Can officers just confirm that the viability assessment goes as far as we are able to make it go? Because frankly, to turn around at reserved matters stage and deliver barely 10% of what they should be in affordable housing terms is, well, it's not acceptable in my view. So can you confirm that we've gone absolutely as far as we can on this?
Through you, Chair, as detailed in the report and the presentation, the viability assessment has been independently assessed. If it didn't include the information required or wasn't carried out in the way set out in the guidance, I'm sure the assessor would have come back to us and made those points. He did go back and seek clarification on the retaining structures and the foundations. Rather than accepting that at face value, he went back and sought further information to ensure that the figures that they were quoting did stack up and were reasonable in relation to the development. And his advice, which, as I say, is independent advice, is that the assessment has demonstrated the proposals are on the limits of viability anyway, and that we wouldn't be able to ask for anything further in this case.
Okay, thank you. Although I think most of us would have appreciated a greater level of affordable housing, but if the viability assessment and the independent assessment says that we can have no more than what is there, it's a great shame, but it seems to me that our hands are tied. Councillor Butlin. You're muted.
When they do a viability assessment, do they take into account the cost of the land that the cost that the developers have paid for the land? Because in my view, if they have paid more for the land than it's actually worth in terms of viability and also commitment towards affordable housing, that's their problem, not ours. My view. Just kind of can I have clarity on that? Is the element that the fact that they paid too much for the site in the first place?
I think legal will want to come in on this one.
Hi, subject to anything Karen wants to add afterwards. This is always a contentious point, and it's certainly a very valid one to raise, Councillor Butlin. Viability assessments, there's an increasingly standard way of producing them, and the land values that are taken into account in running the viability assessments are standardised, and they look at things such as benchmark land value. So there is significant case law that says if a developer overpaid for the land, then that should not be taken into account. So that is factored into the viability assessment, that an appropriate value for the land is included rather than necessarily the actual price paid.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers the question. Councillor Sanderson, you have your hand up again? Or have you just forgotten to take it down? Thank you. Right, there seem to be no more questions of clarification on the officer's report, so we will move into debate. Councillor Sanderson, you're first up. And you're muted. No, his hand's gone down. Right.
No. I'm unmuted now, Chairs. I'm just having some little technical problems.
All right, we've gathered that this evening. Right, Councillor Mrs.
Yeah, I haven't finished my. You just called me to speak, so I'll speak now.
Right. Yes.
Okay. I share members' concerns about the affordability levels when one sees that house prices are still rising, despite the fact that we're moving into a recession, which is predicted to be the worst for 30 years. So I think I take Councillor Butlin's point on view is have they overpaid for the land? In terms of, and I think if we continue to not push developers to get these schemes through earlier and more quickly, then we have less affordable housing for those in most housing need. But that's where I think I am at the moment. I'm not happy that we've not got what we were promised.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Brown.
Yes, just to say I agree completely with Councillors Butlin, Picker and Sanderson. I'm really disappointed and extremely unhappy that there's only 8 affordable dwellings out of 146 That's 5.4%. It's miles away from what's suggested as best practice. And in the current climate, I think it's irresponsible to allow building like this to take place, given that there's such a pressure on, such a need for affordable housing. It doesn't match what we said are our ambitions in the local plan. And the fact that possibly the land was overpriced, and definitely the size of the development is going to impact on the viability of how much affordable housing can be there. We need to think very carefully about what kinds of precedents we're laying down here.
Thank you. Councillor Eccleston?
Yeah, I'd just like to throw in my support for the other council as well over affordable housing. I think, just as an observation, I think that, and to pick up on Councillor Butlin's comments, I think that the developer would have had enough knowledge, I guess, to have looked at that land in the first place and said, you know, it's going to cost us an awful lot of money to do what we need to do because of the slope, and that would have been factored into their application right from day one. So I share everybody else's concern over the lack of affordable housing on this particular development. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Karen, do you wish to come back on that?
Yes, please. I just wanted to clarify what Sarah had said as well about the price of the land. There's detailed information in terms of the planning guidance as to how viability should be assessed and how benchmark land value should be calculated. And what's very clear in this guidance is that it actually states, where viability assessment is used to inform decision making, under no circumstance will the price paid for the land be a relevant justification for failing to accord with the relevant policies in the plan. So as I said, this has been assessed by the expert. If the expert's view was this is unviable because they have paid too much for the land, I would imagine him to be coming back to me and saying that's not a reason, that's not good enough. But he hasn't said that. He's looked at the information they've provided and he considers it's acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I just need the clarification that we cannot take the cost of the land or what was paid for the cost of the land into factoring our decision tonight. Sarah, can you confirm that, please?
Yes, through you, Chair. If you are minded to refuse based on the developer having overpaid for the land, then that would not be a robust reason for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Srivastava, your hand is up next. We can't hear you, you're muted.
Sorry, on affordable housing, I share the views given by the councillors. Our target is 40%, and Rugby Borough Council have debated this long enough. So how are we going to meet this? That's the question I think we have to face. And especially people who need this way, how they are going to be affected most.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Garcia?
Well, I agree with everybody else. I think this is a really worrying change, really, in a planning application that we gave some time ago. And I can't believe for a minute that any of us would have approved that application if we thought there was only going to be, was it 5% affordable housing? So I'm just wondering why the viability study wasn't done in the first instance and we weren't given that information in the first instance.
Okay. Does anybody want to respond to that, Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think partly the issue is, as Councillor Sanderson asked earlier, because of the size of this development, it would be very difficult to have assessed the viability for 1,300 houses going forward, as the market could change significantly during that time, which is why the target was included in the Section 106 with the option for it to be reviewed at each stage based on the information at that time. As it says in the report, other phases of the development have also had viability issues and haven't provided the target level of affordable housing. But again, each of them was independently assessed based on the requirements of both the Section 106 and national and local policy. I appreciate it's frustrating, but they have submitted the information to prove their position.
Thank you. Councillor Butlin, has your hand gone up again? If so, you need to unmute.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got to come back on this one. One of the bigger, 40% of the cost of any housing at the moment is based on the value of the land. So the value of the land is always the major issue in terms of viability of any site. Now, through personal experience, I know developers going to go over these sites and look at the costs of developing areas of land, and they know to a penny, pretty much, how much it's going to cost them. Now, also the fact that the developers bought for 1,300 houses. This is a section of land that they bought alongside a whole load of others. Now, if they've paid too much for the site, and you're not telling me that what they paid, whether it be they're kind of saying in their assessments that it doesn't counter in, it does. And if as far as I can see, someone's having the wool pulled over their eyes. No, I'm not going to vote against this application because I know damn well, because it's got the so-called experts who said this is an unviable with any more affordable housing on it. But on this basis, this is a greenfield site with a mild slope on it. And for them to basically get away with only 5% of affordable housing on a site like this is kind of bordering on criminal, in my opinion. Now, if they buy it too dear, they should abide by the rules that they know that they've got to do. And they basically kind of used the system and got away with murder. But the system is the system, but it's flawed. And I'm afraid I feel very strongly about this, because if they can get away on a site like this, it means that we'll never get anywhere near the 30% that we've got in our local plan. It makes it all meaningless. So like I say, I'm not going to vote against it because I know it'll go through one way or the other. But someone needs to have a careful look in terms of these viability assessments, in my opinion.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, I just want to say, regardless of what they paid for the land, and we don't know whether they overpaid for it or not, but I agree with Councillor Butlin totally. I think at the end of the day, these are probably well qualified developers, and they will have taken all this into assessment when they bought the land, I'm sure. Whether they paid for it or not, or too much for it or not, is irrelevant. And I think that, and in total agreement with Peter Butlin, I believe that they're pulling the wool over somebody's eyes here, and they need to take a bit of a hit on their profits if that's their rationale for only including 5% of the development as affordable housing.
Thank you. Karen, do you want to come back on this?
Yes, please. I'd just like to clarify again, the viability assessment that was carried out on our behalf isn't based on what the developers paid for the land. It's based on the experts' understanding of markets. It is based on a price per acre plus stamp duty and fees, and it specifically actually says in his report, this land value consideration may not reflect the price paid, and then the NPPF seeks to disassociate price paid from the viability testing. So he's tested it based on the market costs, the build costs and so on. He's not basing it on what the applicants paid for the land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garcia.
I'm absolutely shocked that this wasn't in front of us to start with, and I can't believe that it's been done piecemeal so that each part of it is obviously being knocked down. I mean, I think really we've got to learn from this and redo our own policies so that actually once we've agreed that there's so much affordable housing, that's how it stays, and it's up to them then to work around it, isn't it? Because I'm sure there is probably some ways to get around it. I just think this is an absolute disgrace, and I feel that we're all being played.
Thank you. Councillor Cranham.
Thank you, Chair. well, the system is what it is. The applicant has every right to have an independent assessment on the degree of affordable housing, and it's come back in his favour. And for that reason, I will recommend approval based on the officer's report.
Thank you, Councillor Cranham. Right, we will need a seconder. Councillor Butlin.
As I said, I wouldn't vote against it because I know it's going to go through, so I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Sarah, before I ask committee members to vote on this, can you just recap and summarise how they should make their minds up with the vote that we're about to take?
So obviously, as you all know, it's entirely in your hands as to what decision you make. You are the decision makers. If you choose to go with officer recommendation, which is the proposal that's currently being put forward, then the reasons for that are outlined in the committee report, and you can adopt those as your own. If you choose to go against officer recommendation, then you need to have very clear reasons for doing so, and they need to be planning reasons. It's sufficient for you to articulate those reasons prior to putting any motion for a refusal forward, but those reasons need to be set out before that motion is voted on, so we know why we're voting on a motion for refusal. And it is also acceptable, once you've considered your reasons for refusal, to delegate authority to the planning officers to draft those reasons for refusal in more detail. But the reasons for refusal, if you are so minded to do that, need to come from you before any proposal is voted on.
Right, so the proposal I have is for approval. Now, should the balance of the vote be against, then this application is lost. Is that correct?
If the proposal currently for approval is lost, we would need a fresh proposal for refusal with reasons attached to it, so we know the reasons for the refusal. So it would need to do a subsequent proposal and vote.
Thank you. Right, I think Richard, as head of planning, would like to say something now.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just also wanted to make the point that obviously there are future phases of housing development on this site that will be coming forward. I am sure that the developer is listening in tonight and heard how passionately members have been speaking about affordable housing and how much it is a big issue for this council and members to get as much affordable housing as we can. So therefore, obviously what I'm saying to members is obviously they've got the recommendation in front of them. It's up to them what they decide. But obviously, you know, there will be future phases that come forward. They will also have to be viability assessed if the developers don't go with the provisions in the section 106. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I've got a couple of hands up. Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the issue is that on technical grounds, based on the viability assessment, the conclusion is that it does comply with policy H2, which, if I were minded to propose refusal, would be my grounds for refusing this application. So I do fear that we're in a position where we can't win either way, because my interpretation of the discussion this evening is that although I think it's very clear in members' minds that this is not compliant with policy H2, we do not actually have a basis to refuse on those grounds due to the viability assessment. Could I just have that clarified by legal?
Yep, so through you, Chair, that is the expert opinion that has been provided to the officer and to planning committee. Now, obviously, as an expert opinion, it attracts considerable weight, but as ever, the decision remains with you, and the weight that you give to that expert report on viability is up to you.
Thank you. Councillor Garcia, did you wish to say anything further?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering from Richard Holt's comments, which, you know, is a bit shutting the stable door after the horse is bolted. How many other sections of this development have gone through already without the required number of affordable housing on it?
Yes, through you, Chair. We've had phases R1 and R2 that have both delivered affordable housing. My recollection, unless Karen can confirm otherwise, is I believe, actually no, and it was R4. I believe 2 of them had 20%, another one had 5%, but I'll just let Karen confirm.
Karen?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It's actually in the officer report, paragraph 4.10. Phase R1 had 19.7%, R2 had 5%, and R4 had 1.5%.
Right, okay, thank you. I think Councillor Picker has done a very good summation of the fact that we are absolutely disgusted and totally do not approve of the small amount of affordable housing that this application is bringing forward, but because of the viability assessment and the independent assessment, we really are quite constrained in how we vote. But if developers are listening to this, I think they need to take on board what the committee are saying, and I think that our planning officers and our housing officers need to do their utmost with every application now to insist that we get the right amount of affordable housing according to our local plan. So that is me having my little part in this, and so we are going to move to the vote. So the recommendation is to go with the officer's recommendation proposed by Councillor Cranham and seconded by Councillor Butlin. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3.
So that's 6, Chair, at the moment.
Okay. And those hands down, and those against. Claire, those against?
That looks like 1 against, Chair.
And abstain, please. Abstentions. Is that 5?
Yes, 5, Chair.
Right, Sarah, where do we stand on the voting now, please?
That motion passes.
Thank you very much. With great reluctance, I have to say, and I would like it to be minuted, the disquiet of the committee over the small amount of affordable housing and the reluctance to actually pass it, but having to be passed because of the viability assessment that was independently judged. So please can the minutes show that? Councillor Picker.
Yes, this is possibly not relevant, but could I just ask for future reserved matters application relating to this scheme, would failure to comply with affordable housing provision on other sites be able to be considered as a material consideration, given that we have approved this evening?
No, in short.
No. Your brevity is appreciated.
That's the point. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that very lengthy debate, but I think we have thoroughly aired what needed to be aired on that one, and we can now move on to our next application, which is R20/0443, which is Tofted Southam Road, and the officer is Paul Varnish, and we are considering this because the applicant is a member of staff at the council. So over to you, Paul.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. Can I confirm that you can see the presentation?
I can't see.
No, okay, bear with me.
Not so.
Can you see that now, Chair?
Nope.
No.
Oh, bear with me.
If you can't share your screen, Paul, then I don't know whether Richard can bring the presentation up and take us through the slides for you.
I can if needed to, Chair.
Bear me, I'll try one more time.
I can use my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can see the slide now, so Paul, would you like to take us through it? And there's an awful lot of feedback. I don't know why we're getting that.
Okay, are you still getting feedback now, Chair?
No.
Okay. Okay, for you, Chair, the application is for a proposed annex at Toft Edge, and it's brought before planning committee as the applicant is a member of staff. On to slide 2. Toft Edge is located to the outskirts of Dunchurch, adjacent to the M45 motorway, and slide 2 will show you the site location plan, so you'll be aware of where it is. The annex will be positioned towards the front of the property to the west elevation, and that can be seen on slide 3, which is in the right. The annex is in the right-hand corner, indicated with the red outline. On slide 4, the annex is single story and will incorporate similar design features to the main property. And slide 5 will show the internal layout, which includes a lounge, a parking area. And then on slide 6, the annex can be seen in context. It's a proposed street view. The neighbouring property is the standard property to the left-hand side. The application site is the property within the middle, and then the annex can be seen on the right-hand side, the lower level, and a bit more forward to the site. In terms of on slide 7, the key issues, the annex is of an appropriate size and scale, and will require some dependency on the host dwelling to include the use of the garden and parking area. The initial occupants will be dependent relatives of the applicant. However, a condition number 4 will be included to ensure the annex remains ancillary to Toft Edge. On slide number 8, in terms of an amenity, the annex will be positioned away from any nearby neighbours, and you can see that the nearest neighbour on the left-hand side, that's the neighbouring property, which is in terms of separation distance is quite far away, and the annex will be also positioned a little bit behind the main dwelling. And then the photographs to the right-hand side are the neighbouring properties across the road. On slide number 9, so we look at the key issues would be the character and appearance. So the size and scale of it would say is subservient. There is character and design features similar to the main dwelling, and the materials will be similar. In terms of the street scene as well, I think it can, like I say, it can be seen in context where it fits in with the character of the main dwelling. In terms of other matters, because of where it's positioned, there'll be no impact or very little impact on residential amenity. Highways have been consulted, and they had no issue in terms of highway safety. In terms of air quality, the annex is located within the air quality management zone. Environmental health have been consulted, and as it is a household application, an informative has been requested to encourage the applicant to incorporate measures to reduce the impact on air quality. To sum up, sorry, this is on slide 11. To sum up the planning balance, the local planning authority say the principle is acceptable. It respects the scale and character of the surrounding area. There'll be no adverse impacts on the amenities of neighbouring properties, and would not impact on highway safety and would comply with the local plan and the MPPF. So I would recommend it for approval, subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think that was quite straightforward, and hopefully that has outlined the position for the committee members. Does any committee member have a question of clarification? No, in that case, we'll move straight into debate. Councillor Butlin, your hand's up first, but you need to unmute.
Yeah, I like this. Go past it regularly, and I'll move for approval. No problems at all.
Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Councillor Cranham, you're next.
I'm quite happy to second this. I recall that the original planning application is a very innovative design, and I approve of it. And I'll second the
Thank you. Councillor Garcia.
Councillor Cranham took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say exactly what he did, so more than happy to vote in favour of this application.
Okay, so thank you, committee. Proposed then by Councillor Butlin and seconded by Councillor Cranham. All those in favour, please raise your hands now.
That's 11 for, Chair.
Okay, has somebody not got their hands up yet? How are we doing? Is it still 11?
Oh, it's gone down to 9 now, Chair. I think some members have lowered their hands.
Can you keep your hand raised, please, until we have clarified the number? Not doing very well on this one, are we?
So we've now got a 10 for, Chair.
10-4, okay.
So we haven't got Councillor Cranham raised his hand at the moment, and Councillor Sanderson is not raised.
Councillor Cranham has raised his hand. So, right, does that mean we're now unanimous?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, so that is approved. Thank you, everybody. You can take your hands down now. Right, we now move on to our next application, which is R19/1391, which is Rugby Radio Station, Watling Street, and it is Chris Kingham and Nathan Loud to present.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is at the Rugby Radio Station, Holton, and seeks full planning permission for the erection of a health, fitness and rackets club with access off Holton Way. This is an aerial photo of the site. It's located within the Rugby Radio Station Sustainable Urban Extension with dirt towards the east and south. The site is within a prominent location along the Crick Road, which is one of the main entrances into Rugby from the east and south. This is just another aerial photo showing the application site. These are photos of the site. As you can see from the photos, that the site has been cleared with the exception of the retained hedgerows, with the proposed accesses into the site having already been constructed, and you can see at the bottom where the cursor is the access which this application seeks to use. This is a proposed layout. I won't touch too much on this, as this will be covered later on within the presentation. As to will the design and appearance of the dwellings, but this just gives you an indication of what's being proposed. This dome-shaped building here will house the indoor tennis courts, and this building here will be the main building where most of the facilities will be housed within. This is just a visual illustration of what the proposal could look like. This is what's been submitted, which takes a photo within Holton and how the application and the buildings would look like within Holton. So you can see where my cursor is now. That's your dome-shaped structure with the main building located in this location here, which you can see. A key issues in consideration, one being the loss of employment. The application site totals 2.2 hectares of land and forms part of the 16 hectares of allocated employment land for the Rugby radio station SUE. As a proposed development is for a B2 use, it would result in a 2.2 hectare less employment land at the Rugby radio station. This is equivalent to a loss of 12.5% of the Rugby radio station employment provision. This would undermine the ability of the council to achieve 110 hectare of employment land needed in the borough. In these circumstances, policy ED1 of the local plan is relevant. It sets out that all employment sites, including that at the Rugby radio station, will be retained for employment purposes falling within the B use classes. The only exception to this is where evidence has been provided in relation to the 6 key tests to demonstrate that the land is no longer viable for a B use class. To this end, an employment note has been submitted by the applicant. This fails to demonstrate compliance with the 6 policy tests. The proposal therefore conflicts with and is a departure from policy ED1. In turn, it consequently conflicts with and is a departure from policies DS1 and DS4 because it would undermine the ability of the Rugby radio station site to deliver the full 16 hectares of employment land required by these policies. The other key consideration is the economic growth aspect of what's being proposed. The proposal will allow David Lloyd leisure and health rackets and fitness provider to set up a new club within Rugby. David Lloyd clubs are well established within the UK as a significant employer in the health and fitness market. David Lloyd has identified a need within the Rugby Borough for a new David Lloyd club, which is an important consideration, taking into account paragraph 82 of the National Planning and Policy Framework, which sets out that decisions should recognise and address the specific locational requirements of different sectors. Despite the loss of the employment land, the applicant has sought to demonstrate that the proposal will actually help to increase economic growth despite the loss of employment land. In the first instance, the applicant has demonstrated that the number of jobs that will be created, circa 74 jobs, is comparable to a B8, could generate circa 45 to 61 jobs. The proposal will also meet the need for additional leisure jobs in the borough. Invest in Warwickshire, in support of the application, notes that the type and nature of the proposed development would significantly improve the appeal of the wider employment land allocation for business users and act as a catalyst for delivering the remaining 13.8 hectares of allocated employment land. This is also recognised by the Council's Economic Development Team. At a broader level, it is recognised that the proposed development will result in investment and jobs in the construction on site, as well as increasing the viability of local retail uses, services and businesses. Such matters would have a positive impact on the local economy and prosperity of the borough. Another key consideration is the town centre. Policy TC2 of the local plan states that all proposals, such as what is being considered and what is being proposed, must be accompanied with an impact assessment. A sequential assessment has been submitted with the application, which considers the suitability, viability and availability of 8 key town centre sites. The assessment concludes that these sites are not suitable, viable or available for the proposed development. The key reasons for this is that the town centre sites assessed are substantially smaller than the use proposed and thus not suitable. The majority of the sites are also not considered to be available, and the council are in agreement with the sequential assessment which has been submitted. Another key consideration is leisure assessment. As required by the NPPF, a leisure and health impact assessment has been submitted, which considers the impact on existing committed and planned investment an impact upon the viability and vitality of the town centre. This assessment, which has been submitted, takes into consideration both the cumulative impact of what is being proposed, together with the remaining allocation for B2 use at the Rugby radio station. In summary, the assessment considers that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact upon the vitality and viability of the town centre, while also helping to meet an identified need for indoor and outdoor tennis courts within the borough. With regards to health, the proposal will increase access to and opportunities for physical activity, exercise, recreation and play. It will provide a new space for social interaction and connections, which would help to build and create communities. The facilities would provide a space where people can improve their physical and mental health. It is recognised that there is an under-provision of such health facilities in the east of the borough. It will provide opportunities to allow local schools to use their facilities. The impact assessment, which has been submitted with the application, concludes that the impact on health arising from the proposal would be positive. The proposal therefore complies with policy HS1 and HS2. Now, with regards to the turning to the issue with regards to the design context, hopefully Chris will be able to run through this aspect with you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So I'm just going to run through some of the key design considerations for this scheme. And first of all, to do that, I just want to set the scene a bit by talking about design context, which is really important for this site. So as is displayed on the screen before you, the site is part of Rugby radio station. This is an allocation for 6,200 dwellings with associated employment land and other uses like education and open space. You can see here, this is the newly opened link road that runs across the site. So that's Holton Way. And then you've got the indicated development here. So this is just an illustrative overview of what the site could look like when it's all built out. So the next slide here shows what happens in terms of how we break the site down and make it manageable for development. So what we've asked the developer to do for the Rugby radio station site is submit a development framework plan, which breaks down where all of the employment parcels are, where residential parcels are, where things like education, local centres and open space will come forward. So this is that key overarching document. And the site we're looking at is just in this part of the site here. And as we mentioned just a moment ago, it forms part of the employment allocation currently. In order to bring the site forward and make it more manageable, the site's been broken down into something called key phases. So the next slide, when it loads here, basically just shows key phase 1. So you've got the whole Rugby radio station site outlined by the red line here, and key phase 1 is just one segment of that. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle, with this being one piece, and that is an area of key focus. The application site that we're looking at is located in this area of the site. So for key phase 1, a design guide has been prepared. Now that design guide sets out a series of standards that we would expect development within that area to comply with. So it sets out things like the type of development and how it should appear. And you can see there highlighted, it says that its aim is to ensure that the highest standard of design is delivered on this sustainable urban extension. and importantly, it is a material consideration to make in the determination of applications in Key Phase 1. Within that design guide, there is a regulatory plan which shows out in a bit more detail where development could come forward. So you can see on the screen here, this is the application site, and we're just going to zoom into that now. So the application site is in this area here, which the purple shading indicates it's for employment land, and this hatched area here shows where it's expected that parking and servicing could take place. So the emphasis is very much here that the building and built form should be around the perimeter of the site, with the parking out of view towards the rear. Also of key interest here is this key grouping. That's the Key Phase 1 gateway, and it takes account of the very prominent position of this site along Crick Road and also the central primary street for Holton, where a lot of development traffic will end up coming in and out. Within that design guide, it goes into a bit more detail about that Key Phase 1 gateway, and I've highlighted some key sections here. It says that the gateway requires special attention to design. It will set a precedent for the Key Phase 1 development, and it is crucial to creating a high quality first impression. For design principles, it therefore says it must have an attractive and diverse landscape design. Now, as I've indicated, this area of the site was originally going to be for employment purposes, and to that end it says that a B1 office building should be located at the gateway roundabout to positively address the prominent corner, and that's shown here indicatively where it was expected that the building should be located. And you can see there's key views highlighted here towards where that would be readily seen from. Some illustrative designs have also been provided. So this shows the building wrapping around the corner there. And then again, it shows it in a little bit more detail here. That's that building, and you can see that the access is coming in through the centre with parking to the rear. You can see that parking court's got lots of landscaping, and you can see also that the surface treatment changes. So you've got here a tarmac road indicated with grey, then it changing for the internal access road, and then again the parking spaces being shown in a different material. The design guide also goes into some more detail about commercial built form and how that should look. And to that end, it says that commercial buildings should make a positive contribution to the street frontage. It further says that parking should be arranged in landscaped parking. Attractive landscaping along the frontage edge of the commercial parcel should be provided. Just waiting for the slide to move, sorry. There we go. So this just gives a bit more of a closer look at the image that we saw just a moment ago, and it gives you that visual artist impression again at street view, showing that built line with the internal access road going in between the buildings in that location there. The design guide also talks about public realm materials, and it sets out that the specification of hard materials and furniture must ensure that new development has a recognisable character. Those materials are to reinforce the street hierarchy and create a neighbourhood identity. It then sets out what type of materials would be appropriate for the different surface treatments within this whole Key Phase 1 area. So for things like your primary roads and residential streets, it indicates that tarmac would be acceptable. However, when you're going into shared surfaces and parking areas, it indicates that dark or contrasting set paving should be provided and not tarmac. The Final bit of the design guide that I want to draw your attention to is about the car parking design, and that sets out that the layout and design of vehicle parking proposals should take account of the need to produce a design that fits in with and takes account of local environment considerations and enhances the character and appearance of the local area. So turning to the design that we're now assessing today, we have on the screen here an existing site constraints plan. Now this is really critical in understanding how the development has come forward, because you'll see here that there is a gas main easement running across the site in this location. There is a pumping station in this area of the site, and there is a foul water rising main with a 5-metre easement running through this part of the site. Those easements restrict what built development can be carried out on it. So for example, you couldn't put a leisure building on top of those easements, because if anything then happened to either the gas main or the foul water rising main, there would be real problems in terms of actually actioning any repairs. So the design response to those existing site constraints has been to put the building, the main leisure facility, just to the side of that foul easement in this location here, and then to put things like the outdoor pool and a tennis courts in this part of the site, which still allows for a development over those easements, but ones which are obviously much more easily accessible if any repairs or works were needed to those. In terms of what that looks like, there's another plan here. So you can see there, that's the leisure building. You've got your tennis courts that are outdoors here, an outdoor pool, an outdoor spa area, and then the enclosed dome for the indoor tennis courts here. That leaves parking then located to the front of the site, wrapping around the edge as shown by my cursor here. In terms of how that would appear, you've got the leisure building there and the dome there, and again from a different angle here. So in terms of the impact on visual amenity, it's obviously clear that the proposal wouldn't be in accordance with the key phase 1 design guide. So you can see here, this is what the design guide was saying, that the building should be wrapped around the front of the site with parking to the rear. And that's just to increase that gateway entrance and really ensure that there's a very attractive frontage demarking the arrival into the Holton radio station site development. That contrasts with what's proposed here, which has got the parking in the most prominent position at the front of the site. Then you've got some tennis courts and a pool and a building tucked right back into the site. The buildings aren't positioned by the roads, and it therefore fails to create an active key and prominent frontage. But we do feel that the site constraints that we've ran through, with the easements going across the site and the nature of this leisure use, mean that the layout that we've actually got is the best practical location for the functional use of this development. But essentially, this is the layout that we would really need to allow in order to facilitate this development. But that does leave us with a problem in terms of the parking surface treatment. As I mentioned, the parking is at the front of the site and close to roads, so it's going to be very highly visible. It's at a prominent strategic location, and the proposal is just for hard landscaping. There will be a sea of black tarmac in this area here and white lines. So we need to consider what the local plan says in regard to hard landscaping and design. And in that respect, Chapter 10 of the local plan talks about promoting development, but requires that development should positively contribute to making the borough a better place. It talks about having the highest quality of design that enhances the character of an area. Policy SDC1 talks about having a high quality, inclusive and sustainable design where landscaping and materials are a key consideration. Critically, it says that permission will be refused for development of poor design that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character and quality of an area. Policy SDC2 stipulates that landscaping is an integral part of design. A high standard of hard and soft landscaping will be required. So in terms of black tarmac and white lines, I'm sure we're all familiar with what that looks like, but here's an example of a David Lloyd club elsewhere in the country where it's just tarmac surfacing. And obviously you can see over the years there's been a number of carriageway repairs that have been done there, and essentially you end up with a very poor quality environment. Contrast that with another David Lloyd club that has block paving, and you can see it gives a very different picture and quality of development. And it's worth pointing out that there are a number of David Lloyd clubs across the country that do have block paving. So the proposed tarmac surface is considered to create a visually poor and unimaginative impression to the Halton Rugby radio station site. It fails to be attractive or distinctive. It fails to match high quality block paving surfaces used elsewhere. It fails to comply with the Key Phase 1 design guide. It fails to respect Key Phase 1 gateway and entry requirements to Halton. It fails to comply with the local plan. It fails to comply with the framework, and it fails to comply with national design guidance. So we have requested from the applicant that all of the parking surface should be block paving, but the applicant has claimed that block paving costs too much and that they therefore can't provide it. But that claim has not been substantiated. There has been no viability assessment submitted. There have been no costings by a quantity surveyor, and therefore no weight can be placed on this claim. Nonetheless, a compromise solution was offered to the applicant, asking them if they could just block pave just the parking spaces or internal roads. That compromise solution was rejected by the applicant. We've therefore gone to Warwickshire County Council Highways to try and get an idea of rough costs for the different surface treatments that we're looking at. They've confirmed that naturally block paving is more expensive than tarmac, but the cost is estimated to only be around £60,000 to £65,000 more. And in the context of a multi-million-pound investment, officers consider that it's not cost prohibitive to provide block paving. We would further point out that the design standards at Rugby radio station site and the need for block paving been made clear to the applicant in pre-application discussions. It was therefore a known cost to them for developing in this area, and that should have been taken into account when appraising the site and negotiating the purchase price for the land with the landowner. In terms of precedent, we have a number of schemes across the borough where block paving has been used to really good effect. And the greatest example of this is actually for the council's publicly owned Queen's Diamond Jubilee Centre, as shown on this screen here. So you can see there that there are block paving to all the parking spaces, and therefore that creates that just a more attractive environment. In terms of other examples, we have Elliotsfield Retail Park. We have Halton, so all of the shared private driveways to the majority of properties have this block paving. We have that at Corston, the same thing. And we have it in our local centres. So commercial local centres that are built, particularly more recently at Dolman Farm. This is a very recent picture showing that high quality material that's being used. And if you can imagine these pictures, if it was all tarmac, you'd get a very different quality and impression of development. So we are proposing that condition 7 is imposed to require details of surface treatment to be submitted. Our expectation is that the details will need to show that the car parking areas or the road surface treatments internally are in block paving, and if that's not the case, we would look to refuse that. We believe this condition is necessary to address this design issue and ensure compliance with the local plan. If the condition was removed, the council would have no say in what surface is provided at all. The scheme would be contrary to local plan policies, and importantly, it would set a precedent that other schemes in Halton and the borough could point to resist providing block paving. So what you'll end up with is a reduction in design quality across the borough. That would also undermine the existing high quality design at Halton, which has led to national recognition in the National Design Guide. Aside from design issues, we need to look at highway issues, and you can see here that the site currently benefits from 2 access points off Halton Way. They are only seeking to use access point A via a priority control junction, and you can see here that there would be a barrier to the car park to control access into and out of that. The transport statement submitted with the application indicates that there is sufficient capacity in the surrounding highway network for the traffic that will be generated by this scheme. Parking is based on an assessment of existing clubs. Warwickshire County Council Highways has considered the impact on traffic flows and deemed it to be not significant and not detrimental. The site access and level of parking has also been considered to be acceptable. Condition 5 of the agenda requires 25 electric vehicle charging points to be provided rather than the 2 currently proposed by the applicant. That is necessary to ensure that the proposal complies with our local plan policy. In terms of climate change, the scheme would be able to achieve a very good sustainability rating. That's very achievable for them. To do this, it would utilise things like energy efficient designs in the construction of the building. It would utilise a combined heat and power plant. It would use air source heat pumps, and together that would all lead to a 36.4% reduction in carbon emissions against building regulations. For a range of other issues that are detailed on the agenda, there would be no detrimental impacts subject to conditions. So finally, just to turn to the planning balance, we need to answer the question as to whether this is sustainable development. As it stands, the proposal conflicts with policies DS1, DS4 and ED1, so it's not in accordance with the development plan. So we need to consider whether there are material considerations which indicate that the application should nonetheless be approved, and that very much involves weighing up the benefits of the scheme against the harm that's been identified. In that respect, you have economic considerations. So the key point here is that there would be a loss of 2.2 hectares of designated employment land, and that carries significant weight against the proposal. But on the flip side, the proposed scheme would result in the creation of 74 jobs, which compares favourably to B8 employment uses. It would also result in significant investment in the borough, and it could act as a catalyst to attract further investment, particularly for employment purposes, within that Halton rugby radio station site development. Finally, it would lead to the construction jobs being supported, both existing and new, and it would also potentially help the viability of the area by drawing people into this location. In terms of social aspects, the proposal would increase access and opportunities to sports facilities and exercise. It would provide a space for social interaction and connections. It would improve physical and mental health. It would create jobs which allow people to support themselves and their families. And it would lead to an opportunity for local schools to use those facilities. In terms of the environmental dimension, it would have a neutral impact subject to conditions. So overall, on balance, we particularly feel that the economic and social considerations are such that despite the conflict with the development plan, the scheme should be approved. The recommendation is therefore one of approval subject to conditions and informatives as set out on the agenda. We would also ask that a additional condition is imposed, and that's just to ensure that the landscape areas of the site have level details submitted to us for consideration prior to those landscaped areas being provided. The scheme does show some level changes in that area, but we don't have spot levels for what the proposed finished land level would be in that location. So that's what that additional condition is seeking to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Right, can I say a big thank you to both Nathan and Chris. That has been a very long and very extensive presentation, together with the report that everybody has had submitted to read in advance. And obviously there are a lot of things to weigh up and to balance before we actually come to a decision. So the first thing is, does any member have a question for clarification? Councillor Garcia.
Thank you very much, and that was absolutely fantastic report from you both. And what I was really impressed with was the care and attention that you've taken to keeping Holton the wonderful place that it is, because I can honestly say that is one of the developments that Rugby should be absolutely proud of. It's brilliant with its parking, brilliant with its open spaces, and the one thing that it does lack is this sports provision. So I'm really pleased to see that you've made sure that the block paving stays to keep the standards up. I think that's absolutely vital. The question that I'm going to ask, which I do fear that I know the answer to, and I'm not even sure whether it's, well, I know it's not really a planning consideration, is obviously the people in Holton will want to use the leisure facilities, but David Lloyd is well known for being overpriced. Is there any way that we could condition or suggest that maybe the people of Holton get some sort of discount? Because it's all very well the employment areas using it, but I think it's also vital that the people that live in Holton and support rugby also, it should be affordable for them.
Thank you. I don't know whether anybody can answer that. Sarah, did you want to come back on that?
I would love to. I think Councillor Garcia already knows the answer to this and has kind of answered her own question. It's not a planning consideration. However, we can note those comments and pass them on to our economic development team, who I know have been in touch with the proposed operator, and it's something they could broach with them. So we can hook that up afterwards, but it's not a planning consideration for these purposes.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson. Need to unmute.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Couple of points. How does this fit into the cycle network at Holton? And is there adequate provisions for cycling onto the site to, one, discourage just car use, and two, to ensure that the physical well-being is met?
Nathan, Chris, could one of you answer that, please?
You gone home?
I
think they're probably having a drink.
Thank you.
After all talking.
Yeah, so Holton is designed very much with the concept of sustainability at its very heart, and in order to achieve that aim, they have had to show cycle links going across the site, and also make improvements to areas like Crick Road itself. So what we're dealing with here is just, obviously, as the site plan indicated at the very start, just a very small defined parcel. They're not actually providing any infrastructure outside of that parcel, so like things like cycleways, roads and that kind of thing, that's all put in by the master developer for the site, which is Urban and Civic. So that's been dealt with through submissions by that master developer, and will all tie in to ensure there's a whole range of accessibility, whether it be via bicycles or walking, bus services, and it's going to progressively come more and more on board as the site gets built out, and different triggers in the decision notice and also the Section 106 agreement require different things to be implemented to encourage that modal shift.
Thank you. Councillor Cranham.
Thank you, Chair. Has any developer shown any interest in developing this land for employment?
Through you, Chair, we haven't been made aware of any interest to develop the site for kind of like a B use class.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the reference to the site master planner, Urban and Civic, have they made any comment on the proposed surface treatment at all? Or have they been consulted on that?
They have not been consulted on that by us. They will obviously have their own discussions with the different developers who bring forward parcels on the land, but that's separate to the planning process. So we're not aware of the content of those discussions.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask at this point, the constraints that were mentioned would apply to any development on that site, wouldn't they?
Yes, that's correct. It would.
Thank you. And from the plans that you showed, am I correct in saying that the soft landscaping would actually mask the car parking?
Chair, yeah, so the soft landscaping is a key consideration. That's proposed around parts of the perimeter of the site. And I think, first of all, it's just important to note it's about looking at the quality of the environment throughout the development and creating a coherent street hierarchy. So, for example, when you're looking at something like parking courts to the rear of properties, you would expect surface treatments for that to be provided in block paving and to also incorporate landscaping. And you've also got to have reference to the key phase 1 design guide, which looks at both the soft and hard landscaping together, as I touched on in the presentation there. So that sets out the requirement that, yes, you've got to have your soft landscaping that helps to screen things like the surface treatments and also create a kind of more softer environment. But it also has to go hand in hand with hard landscaping as well. So in our view, you will still see the car parking area through the landscaping that's offered. So you'll also be able to see over it as well in places. So in certain instances, it's just some wildflower mix that's proposed along the key frontage on the site onto Wholesome Way. And we believe that the proximity of the parking areas to the road as well is very much that's going to just aid that visibility. And also it's worth pointing out that the landscaping, the soft landscaping that's provided, isn't as great as some of the other sites, both in the borough and that David Lloyd Club do. So, for example, you have rows of back-to-back parking in the centre of the site. Now, they have indicated some trees within that, but they haven't, for example, put shrub planting through the centre of those, which would obviously further soften and screen views of whatever's put there. So, overall, it's basically considered that, yes, soft landscaping does play a role, but it has to go hand in hand with the quality of the hard surfacing too.
And condition 15 covers that, doesn't it? Because condition 15 refers to landscaping scheme.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Butlin, you're next.
Chair, I'm going to be damned awkward on this one. This is a fair indication that this is very kind of indicates the over prescriptive nature of the planning process in some respects. We're being asked to basically go against the policy on employment when it creates employment. I would argue that we're creating more employment on a very small piece of land than some of the sheds further down the road, which are taking up 10 times the space and employ half the number of people. So I would consider to be this an employment site. Secondly, so could you please ask the officers to kind of explain what do they consider to be an employment site? Secondly, why is there so many charging points? Most of the people will be coming from a very from rugby and the locality. It's there to serve rugby people. The average electric car has got a turnaround of about 200 miles. They'll probably only can travel about a maximum of 10 miles to go to to that site. So, and also when you take into account, we've just put permission for and about to build open the motorway to travel place, and it's got a fractional number of charging points for really long distance drivers. So this seems to conflict and make no sense at all, in my opinion. And secondly, is there enough power in the system to to power up that number of charging points? It's an unnecessary cost to a business, and you, on one hand, complaining that they're very expensive facility for people to use, and then you bang up the costs to these people in terms of some of the extraordinary planning procedures that they're having to go through to get it onto this site. I just don't understand some of the logic on this one at all.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Cranham, your hand is still up. Is that another question? No, okay.
That's a senior moment, Chair.
Nathan, do you wish to come back on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on obviously some of the questions that Councillor Butlin raised. Paragraph 11.5 within the agenda obviously sets out what you typically expect in terms of employment for a comparable use. So whilst we recognise that for a B8 use, for storage and distribution, which you have in Derft, then the proposal would obviously result in more employment. But when you look at other D use classes employment, then what's being proposed in terms of employment generation is a lot lower than your B1s and your B2s. On the note of obviously the car park charging provisions, it's obviously what's set out within our local plan with regards to what's required for development of this size. Whilst it's a lot, what we usually do with a lot of developments is for them to provide a car park management point, which allows them to phase those car park charging points. For example, they could, at the initial stage, put in 10, monitor the usage and uptake of them, and then they would then provide annual data to us to say how they're being used and whether that then needs any further charging points to be included if there is an uptake and usage in all of those at the initial stage.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we've had enough questions of clarification, so we'll move into debate. Councillor Picker.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a site and an application that I'm very familiar with. I travel to and through Halton on a regular basis, and I think that this is going to be an absolute net benefit to the borough and to Halton as a whole. And I'm particularly pleased to note paragraph 13.5 and condition 12 about enabling the site to be used by the schools that are going to be at Halton in the future. I'm also particularly pleased that we have overcome the employment land issue and we have worked constructively on that one, because particularly given the current climate, I think the one thing that's not going to be in massive demand in the future is office buildings. So I will formally move approval in line with what's set out by the officers. The one thing that I would say is that obviously we've got this discussion and debate over the surface treatment, and whilst I absolutely agree that the design principles at Halton that have helped develop it need to be upheld, I do perhaps worry that we might end up in a situation where we make the perfect the enemy of the good. I did note that during the discussions or during the presentation, there was an indication of discussions between the applicant and officers on a compromise solution, and particularly with Councillor Lawrence's comments on soft landscaping. I would just hope that officers can continue to work constructively on this and find a solution that can be delivered that gets what I think is a superb investment in rugby and in Halton to be delivered. So, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Cranham, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. In as few words as possible, I enthusiastically second the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we're finding that from COVID-19, employment opportunities are changing, and they're going to change remarkably from what we were looking at when we first looked at the local plan. We're now talking about 74 jobs in the well-being sector rather than in the concrete office block centre. And clearly, your hands are distracting me, Chair. And clearly, there is a need for us to adjust our employment sites as we go forward. And I think this dome will have some architectural merit and will be a standout feature in that locality. So yes, keep on negotiating, keep getting in those changes members would like to see, like the soft landscaping and those sorts of issues. But I think in terms of change employment use, I think this is the right way forward.
Thank you. Councillor Butlin.
Thank you, Chair. I approve of this application wholeheartedly. We're apparently, since COVID, putting on weight, so we need somewhere for them to basically go and lose it. And also there's the mental welfare, and as more and more people are working from home and do not need office space, I think this is a kind of a really good use of the space, and it also creates a few jobs as well. So I'm more than happy to approve this application.
Thank you. Right, who else has got their hand up?
Tony.
Councillor Sanderson, are you coming back on something, or have you just not taken it up there?
I am lowering my hand.
Thank you. Councillor Gillius. Oh, sorry, and Councillor Eccleston.
I've had my hand up for ages.
All right, Councillor Eccleston, then Councillor Gillius.
Thank you. Chair, I'd just like to say that I agree totally with Councillor Butlin during the questions section, the clarification question section, and I think I'd like to commend officers also. I think it's an excellent balance that they've done between the original proposals for the site and what's been proposed now. I fully support this as well. I'm not clear though on what on the proposal that Councillor Picker's putting forward, because he put his own conditions on the end of it there, so I'm not 100% sure what we'll be voting on. I would propose that we vote on the recommendations of the officers with the conditions that they are suggesting as written.
Okay, thank you. Sarah will want to come back, and I think Ian wants to clarify.
Sorry, Chair. Just on a slightly unrelated note, I just wanted to note that Councillor Garcia has been unfortunately cut off. So she's currently looking to reboot her computer to rejoin the meeting, but she won't vote on this item because she'll have missed too much of the debate. So I've just been on the phone to her. So if you could just repeat your question if Chris can't answer it. Sorry, because I missed just the end of that with Councillor
Garcia. Councillor Eccleston is querying what we're actually voting on. He wants Councillor Picker to clarify exactly the terms of the proposal that he put forward.
Yes, sorry, just to clarify that, it's as set out in the officer's report. It was more in recognition that condition 7 will require further negotiations. That was all. But no, I'm moving approval as set out in the report.
As set out with the additional condition that was put on. Yeah. Councillor Gillius.
Yes, Chair, just with fear of repeating what's already been said, I totally agree with what Councillor Buckland said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else before I move into the vote? Councillor Eccleston? No? Right. In that case, it has been moved by Councillor Picker, seconded by Councillor Cranham, that we approve this scheme. So raise your hands and keep your hands up, please, until we say to lower them. Right.
So that's 11 for the motion, Chair.
And we've lost Councillor Garcia with connectivity problems, so it will only be 11. Right, you may lower your hands, everybody. Right, Sarah, before we move on to the next application, do we know if Councillor Garcia has managed to join us?
Through you, Chair, she's not logged back into the meeting yet. I don't know whether you want to give whether we want to take a few minutes break to give her a chance to reconnect.
Can we do a 5-minute adjournment and see if we can get her back? Because I know she probably does want to speak about the next application. And can IT put an adjournment notice up, and we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 8 o'clock, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Michael, did you get that? Oh, I've lost Michael.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, if you've still got your hands raised, councillors, you can lower them. And we're going to move on to the next application, which is R19/1496, 117 Newbold Road, and Nigel Reeves is to present. Most of you will remember we did a site visit to this when we looked at the original application. So it is over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. If you recall, the site is 117 Newbold Road, and it's what they're applying now for is the extension of the approved scheme from 98 apartments to 122 apartments, and the provision of 73 parking spaces, cycle and refuse provision, planting and landscaping. In effect, it's an extension of the western and the southern wings of the building, the previously approved buildings, on the 4th floor to provide the additional units. That shows the site. This is Newbold Road, Wood Street, the GEC entrance. This building now has been demolished. It was the old building that was used for the car wash. And again, that's the existing site plan. It's a full planning application. The site was the former gasworks and more recently was used for car rentals and temporary car wash. It's a scheme for the replan of a previous approval, and as I said, the extension will add another story to most of the western wing and partly the southern wing of the existing L-shaped building. Access is gained from Newbold Road with a maximum of 73 parking spaces provided in a rear parking court as before. Amenity planting and informal open spaces provided along the site boundaries and close to the building. An application was previously approved by the Planning Committee on 18th of July 2018, which I'm sure you recall. The replan and increase in numbers is required as the 98 flat scheme is claimed to be unviable due to increased remediation costs on the site. Modifications to the design of the building for the same reasons have already been approved via a minor material amendment earlier. That's a view of the site from the Wood Street corner looking to the site, and you can see the site is now mainly cleared. Again, that's another site showing looking up towards 115 Newbold Road, which adjoins the site. And that looks towards 80 to 86 Newbold Road, which faces the site. And that's the GEC access. This picture shows the relationship of the site and the rear of the properties on Worcester Street. The matters for consideration tonight relate to the impact of the additional 24 apartments plus the changes to the common areas around the building only. These include, again, the principle of development, design and character, impact on residential amenity, highway safety, car and cycle parking, air quality, and then financial viability planning obligations. Again, the site complies with local plan policy GP2 because the site's in the urban area of Rugby, and it's a very sustainable location close to the town centre, the railway station, and other services. The principle of development has already been established by the granting of the previous planning permission. The current proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable, subject to all of the material considerations being addressed, which we'll talk about next. That was the site that we saw previously. So that shows the north elevation and the rear elevation viewed from Worcester Street. That shows the approved site layout. There are no changes to the siting of the building, and that shows the approved elevations to Newbold Road. This shows the revised site plan. As you can see, there's no changes to the positioning of the building. And again, that shows the building elevation when viewed from the north. In effect, what's been sought for approval this evening is that element there. The main changes to the building are that we've lost the non-uniform sort of building profile, and we've lost some of the stair towers. But what we've tried to do is to get the stair towers built in glass, so at least it breaks up the elevations.
Could you go back to that slide and perhaps just show us where the additional built form is going to be, please? Would your cursor let you do that?
Just bear with me. Yeah, the built form, I'll go slowly, is that element there. It's all of that in a sort of a mansard roof all the way from there to there, like that. Is that okay, Councillor? And there's a little bit on the new.
Sorry, your cursor is obviously not showing on my screen. So if you are using your cursor to show where the additional bits are, it's not actually showing.
Oh, forgive me. Oh, we've lost
Thank
everything.
you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just get back to that slide for you. So if you look at this elevation here, shows this is the 4th story, close to the landmark element on the Newbold Road corner. So what in effect they're doing, can you see that bit? The landmark building to the very eastern end of the building, that stays as it is. If you look along, there's a very short element of 4th story. What it will do, it will project all of that 4th story along the whole of that elevation, and I can show you that. That's the comparison on the if you look at that.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I think that makes it clearer.
Sorry. And then that shows the new revised elevation to Newbold Road. It's where the roughly where the rectangle at the very top of the building is shown. That's where the additional 4th story is. So there's a little bit more 4th story element on that part of the building, and that just shows the building materials. They've been a little bit simplified again to reduce costs because of the there's a range of bricks, some render, and the mansard is a steel roof, so that it gives a definition between the main part of the building and the top of the building. So if we look at the design and character of the locality, again, the policy supports high quality design. The character of the area, though, is a very mix of housing types, and the GC works to the north, and the West Coast Railway line runs very close to it too on an elevated track. It's a prominent location, though, on rising ground when viewed from the north. The proposed building will now be taller than previously approved in parts, but this is still appropriate for the size of the site and its position, producing a landmark feature at the northern entrance to the town. As I said previously, the design changes to the lower parts of the building have already been agreed via a Section 73 minor material amendment application. Overall, with the above changes, the revisions are still considered to have a beneficial impact on the benefit of on the appearance of the locality. And that shows that again shows the approved building that we saw last time. That's the image showing the building now that's now sought for approval, and that shows the building looking down Newbold Road towards the railway bridge. And again, that shows that's the approved plan showing the existing floor levels that we approved, and that shows the additional development. In terms of residential amenity, there's no changes to the position of the building. First of all, the policy does seek to ensure that the amenities of existing and future residents are safeguarded. And I said it's important to note the building position won't change. Key relationships are 115 Newbold Road going up the hill on the same side of the building. The corner gable wall of the new building its closest point is 14.5 metres away, and the site entrance runs between the building and 115. 80 to 84 Newbold Road sits across from the building. The front elevation of the new building is still at its closest point, which is the landmark element on the corner, 27.5 metres, but it moves away to 33 metres away, which is the positioning of the additional floor. And Worcester Street has at least 20 metre rear gardens, and the new building is at least 44 metres away from that. As I said, the impact on 80 to 84 is most critical because the site is raised on the other side of the road, but the separation distances will mitigate any overbearing impact or potential loss of privacy. The additional storey height is on the part of the proposed building facing Newbold Road further into the site and not on the closest part of the building. And the additional floor closest to number 15 is to the northwest, will not lead to a significant loss of sunlight or daylight to the rear garden or house. There was excuse me, significant amenity landscaping space provided around the building and along the site boundaries. And the proposal is therefore considered to be, even with the changes, in accordance with policy SDC1. That again shows the relationship of the houses to the south of the site. Highway safety, this is another key matter that we talked about last time at the meeting. And the policies again require new development to incorporate safe access arrangements and to provide satisfactory parking provision. And Newbold Road, as we know, is a key route into the town and is very busy, especially during peak hours. A key concern of highways was to prevent excessive waiting times on leaving the site in the morning and evening peaks in 2027, when traffic levels are predicted to be at their highest as a result of the new developments. And they're worried about that because of the potential for increased accidents if people try and take risks in pushing into moving traffic. In the previously approved scheme, the number of parking spaces was reduced from 81 to 61 in order to reduce traffic generation and provide acceptable waiting times from traffic leaving the site in the AM and PM peaks. In the current scheme, the proposed number of parking spaces increased to 73, but the potential increased waiting times are mitigated by the introduction of a left turning lane out of the site, which will be an improvement on the current situation. As a result of this, excuse me, the highways have removed their objection and now recommend approval subject to financial obligations to mitigate the impact of the development on the surrounding streets. And this is what we sought last time and will be secured via the Section 106 agreement already in place on the main part of the site, which is on the previous planning permission for the 98. This shows the amended access design. Sorry, my cursor won't show it, but if you look in the centre of the site to the left of Newbold Road, you can see that there is a left-hand turning lane and a right-hand turning lane to leave the site. And then there's also the, if you look further north, there's the right turning lane into the site. And then you can see further north of that, there is the pedestrian crossing to allow people to cross the road from the site to the other side and down Wood Street. In terms of air quality, Rugby is designated as an air quality management area, and Newbold Road is close to breaching air quality limits. It's as per highways concern, it's the right turning movements that stops traffic flows in Newbold Road, and this results in increases in nitrogen dioxide levels. Banning right turning movements was investigated when we considered the 98 scheme that went before you previously, but was ruled out on highway safety grounds. As a result of the changes to the current scheme, Environmental Health now support the changes to the proposal based on the improvements of the site access egress, plus the following mitigation measures. All parking spaces will be fitted with passive electric cables so that all charging points can be available for all parking spaces. There is also, in terms of the sustainable initiatives, there will be significant planting in the form of a green wall along the Newbold Road frontage. There'll be not just a line of trees, but there is a line of trees and shrubs and a framework. There'll be electric heating systems inside all apartments, and there will be the provision of significant on-site parking. Forgive me, come on, yeah.
Excuse me, Chair. The presentation on my screen is stopped on highway safety, and I haven't seen anything else since.
Okay, I don't know what we do about that.
Shall I go back to highway safety and look again? Start
Yeah,
again.
it will help. I say I've got nothing in front of me at the moment.
Right, we're back on highway safety, Councillor Sanderson. So Nigel's going to try and take the next slide forward.
Okay.
Sorry, it's whipped on one, so forgive me. Can you see that, Councillor Sanderson, the amended access design?
Or I've got those words, highway safety, in a blank screen.
Oh, has anybody else got problems? Because mine's working okay.
Well, I think that might be Councillor Sanderson's machine, because I think everybody else is seeing it.
I'm fine.
We're fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Chair, I suggest we continue, because as long as Councillor Sanderson can hear the presentation and what Nigel is saying, we should be okay.
Right. Okay. So sounds okay, is it, Councillor Sanderson?
The problem is if he doesn't make a precise comment, all I've got is I've clicked on. I'm just moving from A to B, and I can't see what he's doing.
Okay. Councillor Srivastava, you've got your hand up.
I'm the same. I can't see all the slides.
You can't see all the slides either.
No, I can only I see approved elevation. That's all I've got on my screen.
Right. Everybody else has got all the slides, but
Yeah,
just
sorry to interrupt there, Chair. I have amended access design.
Yeah, I've got amended access design, but we've obviously got two members who can't see the presentation as it's going through.
Okay.
No.
But legal have advised that as long as you can hear and as long as Nigel is clear in what he's saying, we can proceed. Richard?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Members may find, because my screen partly froze, but it's restarted again, which is fine, is I clicked on the top left activity button and basically then clicked back and the screen then refreshed and I could then see the images. So I don't know if the members who are struggling want to do that.
Okay.
Activity button.
Right, so Councillor Srivastava, Councillor Sanderson, find the activity on the top left hand. Click on it.
Doing that now, Chair.
And then follow Richard's advice.
And then click back to the presentation. It should hopefully reload.
No, sorry, Chair, it's not happening.
Okay.
I've got principle of development now.
Richard, would it help if, have you got the presentation? Would it help if you put it up and took the slides through for us?
Okay. I can see the presentation principle of development.
Yeah.
I suspect the issue is not at Nigel's end. I suspect the issue might be at those councillors' end, because I think everyone else can see amended access design.
Yeah. We've just got two councillors that can't see them.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just stopped on highways.
Okay.
Well, I found it something. Amended access design. Yes,
Yeah,
I've got
that's
that.
what we're looking at, amended access design.
It's the bits between highway safety and amended access design I haven't seen.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's starting to do something again now.
Oh, you obviously dropped out slightly. Right, where are we at?
Right. On
Nigel,
my screen,
can you pick up again?
on my screen count, it says another user took control, and shall I take it back?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So if I go back to highways, let's try and get back to the highway element. Sorry about this. Shall I start now?
Right.
Yes.
Can you both of you now see the highway safety one? Yes.
I can see highway safety now. Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Nigel. If you carry on then now.
Yeah. So as I said previously, Newbold Road is a key route into the town centre from the north and very busy during peak periods. And when we looked at the application last time, one of the key concerns of Warwickshire Highways was to prevent excessive waiting times to leave the site in the AM, in morning and evening peaks, because that would result in potential for increased accidents. As if people get frustrated waiting, they sometimes take risks and try and push into the flows of traffic. In the previously approved scheme, the number of parking spaces as a result was reduced from 81 to 61 in order to reduce traffic generation from the site and reduce waiting times, and that overcame the highways concerns. In the current scheme, the proposed number of parking spaces is now increased to 73, but the potential increased waiting times are mitigated by the introduction of the left turning lane out of the site, which will be an improvement on the approved situation. As a result, the highways have removed their objection and now recommend approval subject to financial obligations to mitigate the impact of the development on the surrounding streets. And this has been secured via the previous Section 106 agreement already in place on the main part of the site, which was secured under the previous planning permission. That shows the amended design. In the Newbold Road runs north-south. If you look to the left centre, you'll see the access egress to the site, and you'll see the arrows leading out of the site. There's a left-hand turning lane and right-hand turning lane. That's the main changes, and 2 cars can sit in each lane. And then further north of the site is the pedestrian crossing between the chevrons in the road. Air quality is another key matter, and as we know, Newbold Road is close to breaching the air quality limits, and again was a concern about and why environmental health raised concerns at the last planning application. And again, it's the right turning movements that slows and stops traffic flows in Newbold Road, both in and out of the site, that results in increases in nitrogen dioxide levels. Banning right turning movements was investigated but ruled out on highway safety grounds, but this remains environmental health preference. But as a result of the change introduced in the left-hand turning lane and the additional information, environmental health now support the changes to the proposal based on the improvements of the site access egress, plus the following mitigation. On-site electric car charging points are provided. Electric cables will be provided to all parking spaces on the site, and then there's also the sustainable initiatives. There will be a green wall planted along the Newbold Road frontage. That will comprise a line, not just one line of trees, but at least a double line of trees with framework, shrub planting, etc. And that will have a significant impact on the reducing pollution levels and nitrogen dioxide. There's also a significant provision of secure on-site cycle parking spaces on the site. Excuse me, turning to parking, local residents again raised significant fears that parking will push onto surrounding streets as a result of this development, and we've had quite not a lot, but quite vociferous objections. The increase in parking spaces, 73 spaces, now meets the parking standards for high access zone. We're not exactly in a high access zone. The high access zone boundary runs along the, forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the street, but it's the street that runs to the north of Caldicott Park and out onto Newbold Road. There is a parking management plan which is included in amended condition 8, which will prevent people on the development applying for a parking permit in surrounding streets. And also the other, sorry, I'll cover this in the next bit. And to prevent overspill parking, the Section 106 agreement attached to the main planning permission now requires an amendment to the traffic regulation order preventing new residents in the development from applying for new parking permits in surrounding streets. The Section 106 contributions allow a consultation with residents in Worcester Street to include the street within the residents' parking zone. At the moment, Worcester Street is the only street in the locality that is not in the residents' parking zone. So there is a potential that without any parking controls, anyone in the locality can park in Worcester Street, including from the development. There is room for 230 cycle parking spaces and secure parking storage areas around the site. Amendments to the conditions. In terms of condition 2, the approved plans, I just wanted to add, for the avoidance of doubt, the plans listed below shall relate only to the 24 additional units permitted by planning permission reference. This is the current planning application reference, and the common areas of the site around the building. Amend condition 8, parking management. The development shall not be first occupied until the applicant has submitted a parking management plan to the planning authority, which shall be approved in writing before the first occupation of any flat, demonstrating the following. And it's a parking plan showing a maximum number of parking spaces, 61 parking spaces for the previous scheme and 12 parking spaces for the additional spaces that are provided in this planning application. And they shall be numbered to relate to either whichever flat the respective parking space is allocated to or marked visitor space. Measures to prevent any vehicles of residents of the development who do not have a right to park on the site, i.e. have a parking per space or abilities to use the visitor spaces from entering the site. Also measures to prevent any overspill parking outside of any of the identified parking spaces on the site. Measures to control and manage visitors and deliveries to the site. Provision for disabled parking, visitor parking, and for loading, unloading and refuse collection. And then the development shall be implemented in accordance with the approved details thereafter. Conclusion. The sites, the presumption in favour of sustainable development would fit in this case because it's a sustainable site. I've heard earlier we've had a lot of debate about the financial viability. The financial viability on the scheme was very, very marginal on the previous scheme, and that meant that there were no planning obligations apart from the essential transport contributions that we've talked about earlier, due to significant decontamination works. Again, it's been independently checked, and it again indicates that no planning contributions towards affordable housing or other community benefits could be afforded, even with the additional 24 development scheme. In terms of the planning balance, the proposal is a very sustainable location close to the town centre, the railway station, is along a bus route and near to shops and local facilities. Some concerns relating to highway safety, parking, air quality were identified, but these have now been overcome. It will regenerate a badly contaminated brownfield site on a main entrance into the town. Given the presumption in favour of sustainable development and the need to boost housing supply set out in the NPPF, the proposal is now seen in positive light. The recommendation is approved subject to the conditions, including the amendments listed in the report and in this presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nigel. Okay, right. Most of us remember this scheme, as I said from before, so this is an additional part of it. Questions of clarification? Right, can't see who's got their hand up there.
That's Councillor Eccleston, Chair.
Councillor Eccleston, please.
Yeah. Just the development itself looks pretty good. I just I've got concerns over the traffic, and as the officer said, right-hand turns out of there are going to present a problem. That area already is a nightmare, as witnessed by anybody that drives it during the peak period in particular, maybe around lunchtimes. And I think that the suggestion that a couple of filter lanes is going to help, whilst it may alleviate it somewhat. I do feel that with Hunter's Lane in close proximity, Wood Street, traffic trying to turn right out of both of those streets, surely the addition of some traffic lights, possibly on the end of Wood Street, would alleviate the problem somewhat, since that would hold back the traffic, allowing people to be allowed into the main traffic flows of that area. Has that been considered at all by Warwickshire County Council Highways Department?
Nigel, do you want to respond on that?
Through you, Chair, yes. There were a range of options looked at last time round when it was considered in 2018. It did, bringing it to committee in 2018 took a long while because there were serious concerns raised by highways, and it was only the reduction in numbers on the site, reducing the numbers of car parking spaces from 81 to 61 that changed the balance from recommendation to refuse to approve. What they've done is they've tried to look at further mitigation. The left-hand lane that's introduced does help to mitigate that, and it does. Looking at the information that's been provided in the transport assessment, the time to leave the site is now less than the approved scheme, so it's a slight betterment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs Brown.
Yes, thank you. I think my main point is you can't really see this in isolation in terms of the impact that it's going to have on traffic and air quality, actually. It needs to be seen as part of a whole development of an improvement of traffic flow along Newbold Road. So my question really is, what plans are there to improve traffic flow generally along Newbold Road that this could form part of? And I'm thinking about the turn into Hunters Lane, the queues that there are for the roundabout onto Leicester Road and so on, or out through Newbold. So if we're looking at this holistically, what plans are there to improve that generally?
I don't know whether that's one for Nigel or one for Richard, who might have a more of an overview.
I can help a little bit, then maybe Richard could come in and assist as well. But there are plans to improve the Hunters Lane and the roundabout at the bottom end of Leicester Road to improve traffic flows, because that is the main thing that causes the traffic build-up on Newbold Road. Richard, have you got anything to add to that, please?
That was exactly what I was going to say, Nigel, so thank you.
Okay, all right. Hopefully that's answered the question. Sorry?
Can I just very quickly ask if we know, is there a time frame attached to that? Do we know when that's going to be thought about?
Unfortunately, we don't, Councillor, because obviously it's linked to Warwickshire County Council and their programme of works. Obviously, it's scheduled, but I don't have that information to hand, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Srivastava?
My concern is also the traffic. I used to work in English Electric AEI, now GE. The traffic coming from the GE also will be turning left. And I think this is a great problem on the traffic issues on that side. I don't know what kind of assessment highway authorities have made about the traffic conditions at peak time.
Councillor, through me, if I may answer that. Well, this is why a transport assessment was prepared for the 2017-2018 planning application for 98, and the addendum assessment that was prepared now. And it's not been an easy ride for the developers. There has been a lot of to and fro between highway consultants, but it's been found that on balance that the impact on the traffic flows on Newbold Road won't be significantly increased as a result of this development, and that's the reason why that the Highway Authority have recommended approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And I suppose we have to take the Highway Authority's view when we are considering this. Councillor Eccleston, Councillor Mrs Brown and Councillor Srivastava, can you take your hands down if you've finished with your questions? Thank you. Right, if there are no further questions, then we'll move into debate. And Nigel, you can take your screen down now. Thank you. Councillor Butlin.
Thank you, Chair. We've got to bear in mind this is an increase on the original application, and there's already an application that has been approved. So all we're technically looking at is the increase in numbers that we've got before us today, as above what was originally approved. So I'm happy with the extra slip lane in terms of the inner access, and I can also confirm, as already asked, that the Avon Mill roundabout and the Hunters Lane junction are being designed for new improvements. All we're waiting for is the final funding, which is quite a considerable funding requirement, because I think it's going to cost in excess of £8 or £9 million. I don't know the exact timing of when this is coming from, but it has been designed and will eventually be put in. Bearing in mind we're just talking about planning permission for this site, there's a fair chance that those improvements will start before the completion of this project. So fingers crossed that that will happen. But in terms of looking at it in terms of the increase in the number of units from the original application, I'm more than happy with this application, and I think it addresses most of the problems. Bearing in mind there is going to be considerably more improvements on the access on the roundabout and Hunters Lane. So I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Sanderson? Can't hear you, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I was one of those who opposed this scheme last time because of the highways concerns. It does seem that a number of those highways concerns are now being met, and I'm particularly pleased to see that there will be a proper consultation with the residents on Worcester Street, because it's one of the most difficult little streets to get in and out of on New Bowl Road. I won't mention the local transport plan the County Council owes us, because that would obviously help mitigate quite a lot of traffic problems in that area. But I think this is an improvement on the previous scheme, particularly the increase in parking on site from 61 to 73.
Thank you. Do I take it you're seconding then this time?
No, I'm just making that comment.
Okay, thank you. I do need a seconder. Oh gosh, all sorts of hands are going up now. Councillor Picker, were you next?
It was either myself or Councillor Cranham, but I think based on the evidence provided by the officer today, and thank you again for the presentation, it does appear to have overcome some of the issues of the previous approved scheme, so I will join Councillor Butlin in seconding approval.
Thank you. Councillor Cranham.
I was going to second the proposal, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gillius.
Yes, Chair, having driven up that road many, many times over the last few decades, I can tell you that that section of the New Bowl Road is a complete and utter bottleneck. And I do hope that the scheme that's going to be implemented down at the Avon Mill will help to mitigate all the traffic issues from traffic coming out of Wood Street, Lancaster Road, and from the GE. You know, so let's hope that everything goes according to plan.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions before we move into the vote? Nigel, you can close your presentation down now because we're about to move into the vote. Nigel, can you hear me? Thank you. Right, so we have had it proposed by Councillor Butlin, seconded by Councillor Picker. All those in favour, raise your hands, please. Keep your hands raised until we know. How are we doing, Claire?
So that's 9-4 approval, Chair.
Okay, so take your hands down, please. Hands down, everybody. Right, those against, please show. No abstentions. So we're 2 votes adrift, are we?
Yes, Chair, we are.
So, okay, we'll need to vote again then, please, because 2 people haven't voted. So please raise your hand in favour. And keep your hand raised.
So that's unanimous, Chair. That's 11. And obviously Councillor Garcia has left. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hands down, everybody. Right. Next agenda item is number 5, which is Planning Appeals Update. Head of Planning, would you like to update us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Appendix A is primarily to note, which is obviously planning appeals determined for Q1, 1st of April to the 30th of June. Appendix B were outstanding appeals at the 30th of June. Now, we've had 2 decisions come in since this report was prepared. They are the top 2. 9 Hayes Close, that was dismissed by the Planning Inspectorate on grounds of design. And then Featherstone Farm at Wrighton and Dunsmore, that appeal was allowed on the grounds that the inspector felt that it was acceptable development in the Greenbelt and didn't impact on openness. Everything else remains outstanding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gillies, you have a question?
Yes, I'm just wondering whether the officer could just give me a little bit of an update on the Fossway Monks Kirby application, certificate of lawfulness for some buildings that were claimed to be used for forestry. That's R19/0906.
Does that come under this agenda item, Richard?
That's what I'm looking for.
It's Appendix A.
Okay, the first one.
Yeah.
That it was allowed. Yes. Unfortunately, Councillor, no, I note the appeal was allowed. I don't know if there's any works commenced on site unless you know to the contrary of me. I'm not familiar at the moment. I mean, I can obviously ask the officer in question, Chris Davies, who has obviously now left, if she's had any further information, or you can contact her directly if you wanted to.
Okay.
Okay, so, I've got to report to the parish council at Monks Kirby tomorrow night, so I just want to armed with a bit of information.
So, Richard, could you make sure that Councillor Gillies gets an answer to that tomorrow?
Yeah,
Thanks.
I will. I'll contact Chris so she can let Councillor Gillies know.
Thank you. Yes, she did ask permission if she could leave after she'd done a presentation, and I did grant that. Okay, agenda item 6 is advance notice of site visits.
We haven't had any, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And agenda item 7, delegated decisions.
Noted.
And they're to note.
Yeah. Right, it has been a very long planning committee meeting tonight, and can I thank members for their attention, their questions and their debate. Very, very thorough. But Richard, can I also thank you and all of the officers for such an excellent standard of reports and presentations tonight. It really has aided the committee in how they've made their decisions. So that concludes the planning committee for tonight. For members of the public who've been watching, I hope you have found that of interest and informative, and hopefully you'll come and join us for another meeting. So thank you, IT. You can now stop streaming. And can you confirm when you've stopped streaming, please?